Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Demonic threat level increasing.
Hold the line!
All the power of hell cowering before one man.
id Software presents Doom, The Dark Ages. Available now on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC.
Rated M for mature.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kann du Norsk?
If you've heard that sound from Babbel before, I bet you do. Babbel is the science-backed language learning app that actually works. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel gets you on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. With over 16 million subscriptions sold and a 20-day money-back guarantee, just start speaking another language with Babbel. Right now, up to 55% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/Spotify podcast. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify podcast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Come meet me at the Musial with Allen and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
And welcome into another edition of Me and Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Top at C70. Allen Medlock getting closer and closer to his return back here at the beginning of June. But before that, we still got a run of good guests. And this week, we're talking to a couple of guys with a podcast that's a little bit different than our normals. We're talking with Thomas Nance and Jonathan Cross of St. Louis Cardinals Beyond the Hall of Fame, saluting Unsung Heroes. Tom, John, how are y'all doing today?
Good. We're very glad to be on with you today, Daniel. We appreciate it.
Doing fine here, too, especially considering how early it is for me.
That's right. Jonathan's out on the West Coast, so he's 2 hours behind us on a Saturday morning as we record this. Tom is in Illinois, and I guess that leads me to the first question that I wanted to ask is, how does, I guess is a better way to say, a guy from Illinois and a guy from California meet up to do a podcast?
Well, I initiated reaching out to John after I saw a Facebook post by him. It fascinated me, this post about Barney Schultz, a Cardinal relief pitcher who I think was 39 years old, had been in the minor leagues forever, but played a critical role in the Cardinals World Series championship run in '64. I thought, wow, that's fascinating information. Never heard of this guy. And other people should know about this. And I wonder if it would make for a great podcast where we featured people like him. I reach out to John. We have an hour-long conversation. Like, hey, let's do this. And so, that's how we hooked up 2 hours apart.
That's pretty impressive, John. What was your impression when you got that message and thought of this idea?
I thought, you know what, it's something that's sort of in the back of my mind that I've been wanting to do, but didn't know how to approach it. And Tom had the experience and interest. I said, well, why not? You know, this would be fun. I had always had fun doing these posts. I did a lot of them for like on an NFL vintage page on Facebook. And people really liked that I went more in depth about people's stories, about them and players that a lot of people wouldn't have heard of, especially some of the old timers. And so I was like, yeah, this sounds great, and so I started digging into like, and he said, the players that made a difference but don't get the headlines.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, and that's the thing about the Cardinals, right? The Cardinals have this deep and rich history that has gone on forever, but also has been there are a lot of books and writings and things like that. So you can find these players and gets a chance to really highlight them. And y'all have been fortunate enough to talk to some of these players as well. I know that y'all have had a number of interviews. Who all have you discussed, and maybe which one was your favorite?
We've had a number of live interviews with players who are still alive and I mean, they're in their 80s, so you never know what you're going to get with somebody in their 80s. But some of these guys are still not only alive but spirited and have amazing memories. I know John and I said, "Gosh, I hope my memory is half as sharp as this guy's," as he's recalling some of the events from the 60s, even as far back as 64, and being able to share anecdotes with crisp details. John can help me out with this, but I know we've had um, not Joe Horner, but now I'm drawing a blank. John, take it over from here.
well, we've had, Dick Hughes, who's been a font of knowledge, Gordy Richardson, who was really fun as well. We did Larry Jaster just recently, and he was just like he was great too. It was a great interview with him. We did one for Carl Warwick, mostly with his wife Nancy, because Carl unfortunately was suffering from dementia, and he just recently passed away.
Yeah,
unfortunately, but she had her memory was so crisp and clear. It was like I was like reading the entire thing I posted about him. I wrote about him. I mean, and it was just like it was great getting a wife's perspective from that time period, because players weren't paid nearly what they are today.
Right.
And the details about how a wife's life, I mean, for a baseball player, especially during the minor leagues back then, it was eye opening. And so those were all like fantastic. And then just real quick, I did a story on Dave Ricketts, and I thought it was just going to be a one little short story and all that. And it ended up we did 3 or 4 episodes on him.
Yeah.
And we got to interview Terry Kennedy and Danny Schaefer both for that interview, for their information on Dave Ricketts.
If you haven't had a chance to listen to that episode where we interview Danny Schaefer, I would highly encourage it, because John and I just shut up while we listened to him talk about his stories where he interacted with both Yadier Molina and Wainwright, and these were minor league experiences, but it was almost jaw dropping. We're like, oh wow, this is awesome! Those insider moments that were pivotal in both Wainwright and Molina's growth in the minor leagues is like awesome. We were just spellbound and fascinated by listening to him tell, and he knew what he was doing too. He says, these are the stories that you're gonna want to hear, and so we did and enjoyed them very much.
Yeah, I've often found that the best shows are, are when I shut up and let the guests talk. So I understand that. Yeah, that is pretty incredible to have those opportunities, and to have those kind of insights. Because you're right, you're not likely to get a Wainwright or a Molina to come and sit down with you, but when you can hear some of those stories about their backgrounds from other people, it's very impressive and it's very meaningful. So I guess the question is then, especially when you're reaching out to older players, older people, how are you getting a hold of these people? Because it's not often as easy as dropping a Facebook message.
No. We did land the interviews with Schaefer and Kennedy through the Retired Major League Baseball Players Association. I'm not saying it exactly as it is, but that does exist. And we have a contact person that can reach out to certain people. And Kennedy and Schaefer, they're relatively young. And so she was able to contact these people through email. But that doesn't work with people that are in their mid to upper 80s because they don't interact with email. They're not technologically adept. So we haven't been able to find these older guys that John just mentioned. We've actually had to do detective work. I'll tell you how I found Larry Jaster, the guy we just interviewed. From John's research, we knew that he was from Michigan and what high school he's from. So I just started calling around in Midland, Michigan, I think is where he's from. Called the high school. I called the library, and people just didn't want to give me information. But I did find out that his son or nephew was a principal there. And I thought, well, I wonder if there's any other relatives that are teaching in that school system. So I went to the school system and I found a Jaster there, or the last name that was connected to the son she married. Anyhow, emailed her, told her I'm a former teacher. I'm doing this with podcasting. If I got the right person, could you let your father-in-law know that I am trying to interview him about his time with the Cardinals? And that's how we hooked up with him. All of a sudden I got a call. This is Larry Jaster. I'm like, oh, got to spend an hour talking with him, and him sharing Bob Uecker stories, him sharing the time he just missed a perfect game, but ended up beating Tom Seaver anyhow, and actually getting a base hit off of him. And about that whole, him being his two nicknames, the Dodger Killer, which he earned from winning 5 games against the Dodgers, 5 complete games, 5 complete game shutouts in the year of '66. He got that nickname, and then the nickname he was called the Creeper, and it's just flat out hilarious how he got that one.
Well, yes, we don't want to spoil it. We want people to go listen to it, but and you can find these not only on Spotify, y'all are on YouTube as well, and then you've got your own website, right?
Yes, it's through Libsyn, but it's a direct link which has all the episodes on there, and we do have a Facebook page.
So, well, and we'll try to, if I remember, I'll try to put the link in the show notes. I don't always remember to do that, but I'll do my best. If not, we'll put them in the tweets and things of that nature. But so do you have other ones coming up in the pipeline, or are there people that you're wanting to track down and talk to?
That's John's area.
Yeah, so I wanted to do Al Jackson because he was a relief pitcher for the Cardinals 67, 68 seasons. And so he was sort of critical for the 67 especially. He was, the guy that they could use to help keep the rest of the bullpen fresh, as well as, just to help, the Cardinals through like a rough game and all that. Because he had been a starter, so he could pitch a little, more, pitch those 2-3 innings, no problem. And we're going to do one on Bobby Tolan. And he's a little tougher because there's not as much information out there about him as there is about all these other players for some odd reason, even though Bobby Tolan was part of the early years of the Big Red Machine in Cincinnati as well. So it's sort of odd that it's like he's hard to find a lot of information on when he had a fairly lengthy career.
Yeah, that is surprising.
Yeah, and he was the one player that broke up Lou Brock's consecutive seasons of leading the National League in stolen bases. He was, during that nine-year stretch, Lou Brock led the league 8 times. And the one year he didn't was Bobby Tolan, who led the league that year.
And he was with the Cardinals when he did that, John?
No, he was with the Reds when he broke it up, but he had just been traded like a year or two after that, before. Because he was a critical player on the 67 team coming off the bench. In the year of the pitcher, he was batting like 250, 260. And for a bench player back then, that was pretty good.
Oh yeah.
I mean, for anybody in '68 would have been great. So the way the league was running back then. So yeah, those are pretty good. Have y'all had a chance or had any kind of success in reaching out to either the Cardinals PR or other teams PR teams to maybe track down players that way?
I have, and that's how I got a hold of the individual who is with the retired Major League Baseball Association. But the Cardinal organization itself didn't seem to have anybody that was connected with members of the past. There was no coordinated effort there. There's no pool of resources so far that I've been able to discover, unfortunately.
That is interesting, given the fact that they've got their own, the Hall of Fame over there and all the artifacts that they have. I mean, and to some degree, right? You would think they'd have contact information for when they bring back these teams of the past, the '85 team that they're celebrating some this year and things of that nature. So I don't know and maybe it is more through the retired, they just let that be a clearinghouse. But I've always wondered how they were. I just assumed that they kind of kept tabs on these guys, and maybe they don't.
And they should, with the richness of the organization. I know I want to tag on to John talking about these other players that we're going to take a look at. It's made me more of a complete Cardinal fan. Now we're looking at players in the '60s, and both John and I were rather young then, so we don't have any memories. I mean, we can all cite Lou Brock and Bob Gibson and others who were the headline stars of that era, but they couldn't have done what they did without people like Bobby Tolan and Larry Jaster and others. It's like, wow, there is a whole nother layer of baseball lore that goes behind those headlines, and that's what we're having fun exploring and bringing to light and saluting these unsung heroes.
Yeah, and it helps with the Cardinals. They've had some successful teams that have been written about, right? I mean, the '64 team has some books and other things, and so but other teams that might not have been as successful, like a '66 team, there's going to be good stories out of pretty much any season, but the seasons that don't end well, those stories kind of get buried, and it's good to have a chance to bring those to light.
Yeah. And it's just been so much fun listening to these gentlemen speak. I'm thinking, God, these guys are wearing World Series rings. They rubbed elbows with Willie McCovey, Hank Aaron, and all the other stars of that. Roberto Clemente, like Larry Jaster. We asked him, so who gave you trouble as a pitcher? He says, well, Clemente didn't seem to have any problems with me. And he says, I don't remember Hank Aaron doing much, but Willie McCovey, yeah, he hit me pretty good. Just so much fun listening to these guys tell about these interactions with all the stars of the past.
And go ahead, John.
Yeah. So, one of the players we tried to get an interview with, but never could quite, and I would love to, be Ron Taylor, because he was a member of the '64 Cardinals, that, did that amazing thing, with the Philly flop and all that kind of stuff, and, just pulled it out on the last day of the season. But he was also a member, and a key member as well, of the '69 Miracle Mets. And so it's like, at the beginning of that season, he was the only player that had ever appeared in a World Series game on the entire roster.
Yeah.
So, yeah, probably during that season, he's going, yeah, guys, I've been there, done that already.
Well, I mean because that Mets team was young, and the history of that franchise was so terrible at that time. To have anybody that had that kind of experience had to be a benefit to the team as a whole.
So similarly, is Larry Jaster when he moved to the Expos as part of the expansion draft. He ended up Cardinals making him available. So he turns out to be the answer to the trivia question: who threw the first pitch in Canada for the Expos at Jerry Park, I believe was the name of the stadium, and that's Larry Jaster. Fascinating Yeah, it is.
Well, good. And yeah, so how much research do y'all do going into this, or is it more about, hey, we found a guy, we know his, the shape of his career, so let's just get him on and tell stories?
And that's again, John does the overwhelming bulk of the research.
Yeah, it can take me as much as 5 hours of research for each player. Going through, sifting through all the information, getting everything to the metaphorical pen to paper, and all that. Because sometimes, the information that's out there is incredible. I mean, Saber.org is a fantastic source, but a lot of times I find other things from like newspaper articles and things like that that help round out the whole thing. It gives a little more depth to certain stories that, that Saber.org, which tries to condense it, doesn't always give you all the details.
Yeah.
They just tell you what happened and when, but doesn't tell you, like a lot of the whys and things like that. And then, if possible, and if the person's still around, Tom would try and reach out and get the interview done, and or set it up, I should say, and then we just do it in and just have fun. We just we'll ask a couple of questions here and there, but just sit back and let them regale us.
And I imagine they really appreciate that too. I mean, especially because you're reaching out, like you say, unsung heroes, guys that don't necessarily get a chance to tell their story very often, right? Or have interest expressed in it. I mean, they might in their, their small pond of their area, wherever they might be, but even then, maybe not, just because of how long ago they've played. But so to get a chance to revisit those things, I imagine they enjoyed it just as much as y'all do.
Yeah, that's true. You can tell that they're enthusiastic about it, and that they're once they warm up a little bit, they're enjoying it along with us. Speaking of warming up, the conversation we had with Nancy Warwick, which we didn't know, you never know how well, as you know, with your podcast, you never know how interviews are going to go. And it took her a while to warm up, but then she just started making us just bust out laughing, including the story she told about when she first met Carl Warwick down in Texas when he was playing for TCU. She found out he was an All-American, and she says, "Well, All-American. I didn't know what that was. I just figured he was a good old boy. He was just All-American like the rest of us." She wasn't impressed at all.
We were rolling on the floor almost on that one. That was just such a classic story, and it's like I said, those are the kind of stories that sort of what makes baseball so great.
And learning about what baseball was like in the 60s compared to current day, oh man, what a world of difference. Like, so many of these older guys retired mainly because of money. They weren't making enough. They had family and other obligations. Like, well, I'm getting towards the end of my career. I'm going to hang this up. Gordy Richardson talks about how he was driving home from his career, and when I think it was Branch Rickey, who may have been with the Mets at that time, called and said, "Gordy, you're coming back next year, right?" He says, "Oh, Mr. Rickey," he says, "I done bought me a tractor. I'm going back to the farm." It made a lot more money.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. There's a local author here in town that has written a couple of books about players from Arkansas. And most of those players are in the 20s and 30s and stuff like that. And yeah, it wasn't the thing that we think it is today. I mean, everybody wanted to make the major leagues, but there did come a point where it was like, I'm going to go teach because that makes more money. And I need to do that, or it's just not, not worth the hassle of training and getting paid peanuts, for one chance or something like that. So it's remarkably how different that things have gotten, in the last 40 or 50 years, especially. But even beyond that, I mean, you and I, we all remember when, Ozzy was like the highest paid player at $2 million. And now I think people make that, Juan Soto might make that in 2 games. So, things have gotten different over the whole span.
Oh no, most definitely. What was it? Tom, it was Carl Warwick. Nancy Warwick told us how Carl, in his first year having retired from baseball doing real estate, made more money than his previous 10 years combined as a professional player.
That's right. That's right.
I
Crazy.
mean, it just tells you how things changed.
Yeah, those guys were truly playing for the love of the game. It wasn't because they were looking to merchandise their signatures or put their name on clothing and do commercials. They were playing for the love of the game.
Yeah. Yep. It was definitely a different era. Well, let's use that to chance to shift gears to the current era of St. Louis Cardinals baseball. I know y'all spend a lot of time in the past, but I am assuming that you kind of keep up with what's happening on the field now as well.
Oh yeah.
Oh, most definitely. And well, yeah, the last couple of years have been at times a bit, shall we say, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Rough, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say. But this year has turned out so far a lot better than I think. I don't know if a lot better, but definitely at the upper echelon of anything we could have expected. It's Cardinals win last night against the Diamondbacks, and Tom, we've seen them play some really good teams over the last 15 to 18 games, and they have more than held their own. So how real do you think this is?
I don't know if it's sustainable or not. A lot of it's going to be dependent upon the pitching. How long, is Palante and Liberatore and Mikolas, who pitched well again last night, can they sustain that? I wouldn't put a lot of money on that. I hope they do. Or I'm rooting for these guys. It's just been. I think I've done what probably you guys did. Like, hey, this season's going to be hopefully interesting. And hopefully it's going to be fun watching these young guys hustle and strive and scratch and work together to provide an entertaining game. And they've certainly done that. And I think they'll continue to do that. I love the speed, love the defense, love the grit, I love the hustle. Some things are going to remain constant. I think the defense will remain constant. I think their speed is obviously going to remain constant. But whether the pitching can keep doing their job, the bullpen seems to be fairly stable. Although, God, can Helsley ever have an inning where it's not exciting? I don't know. So I'll be happy just for them to continue playing exciting, aggressive, fast-paced, hustle baseball like they have this year. I'm hoping they can continue to do that.
John, what's been your opinion as you've watched from the West Coast?
Well, yeah. Actually, this year's a bit of ended up being a surprise. We had that nice win streak and all that. But yeah, and the thing is, it was nice to see us win on the road against the Phillies. And the Phillies are a good team. That was another plus. A lot of the teams who were doing that streak were, the teams we should be beating if we want to be considered taken seriously. But, now it's the teams we were beating teams we needed to beat. Mm-hmm. I know the Tiger series ended on a bad note, but, we still almost pulled out the second game of that one. And, beating the Diamondbacks, too. And they're a good team this year. So, it's... Yeah, as Tom said, Helsley is, he reminds me of Isringhausen towards the end of his career, making innings interesting. But, that's good. Mikolas is doing really good this year. It seems he's not striking out the batters as much as he's, making them not hit well. And the defense has been backing him up on that. And he's changed things around from apparently it seems like. So he's definitely has the batters on their heels, which is a good sign. Palante doing well. Liberatore, he's just like out of nowhere. I never saw this coming. I would never have thought that he would be pitching this well. And we're scoring lots of runs. So,
yeah.
I'm surprised. I was thinking, if we can even repeat last year's record, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
But we got a shot, at least getting into the wild card round. And, then you never know what happens because, as we all said, as a few friends of mine and I said back in 2006, and we had T-shirts made. Hey, you know what? The players are a crapshoot. You just got to get in the league.
I mean, yeah, that is absolutely fair. You don't necessarily know what happens. And just, I think getting into the playoffs would be a great thing, not only for, um, to reiterate how good this team has played this year, but it gives those younger guys that you hope are going to be around a little bit of that experience of a chance to see what playoff baseball is like. And I think that's always been an advantage for the Cardinals, especially there in the late, the 2000s and 2010s when they were going every year. They always had that expectation. They knew what it was like to be there, right? Even if a young rookie was coming up, there were enough people on that team. It's kind of the opposite of what we were talking about with the 69 Mets there, right? Had a lot of guys that knew that had that experience. And so were able to mentor or, give advice to young guys that maybe hadn't been there before. So, if you're looking at a team to be competitive in 26 or 27 or 28, having Mason Wynn and Jordan Walker and Victor Scott and all those at least have some taste of October baseball is only got to be a positive thing.
It makes it interesting for the coaching staff, the front office box. It would be easier for them to make decisions if the Cardinals weren't doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
If they were, languishing in the middle of the division or towards the end, it would make their decisions about playing some of these guys, giving Gorman lots of playing time to see if he can't actually produce like he wants to, and everybody's been expecting him to do. It would make it easier for them to, we're just going to stick with these guys and let them develop. But now they've got to make decisions. Well, I don't know. Do we want to play Gorman in this game because he's not doing well and we're only a couple games out of first place? So it's not an enviable position for them. Those are tough decisions to make. Are we really going to put forth the effort to get into the playoffs, or are we going to stay with our long range goals that we already established at the beginning of the season to develop players, to give them playing time and let them become hopefully the stars of the future? It's an interesting dilemma that they're going to have to struggle with on a day-to-day, series by series basis.
Yeah, it really is. Not only them, but then I think it gets into where we get to the trade deadline. And we've talked about this a couple of times on the show recently. And, even as up to a couple of weeks ago, I was saying, you get to the trade deadline, you just have to kind of ignore where they're at and do what you're going to do. Right. And that's, because you've got a Helsley, he's not likely to come back. You should try to get something for him. And maybe a couple of other guys like that. But as they've gotten better and as they get closer, it's also, I think you have to factor in the idea that this team is going to maybe be good enough to expect an addition. And it's a message that you don't necessarily want to send to trade off a Helsley and to try to, not. I'm not, again, I don't think the Cardinals are ever going to go like all in and try to win this year, but it feels like, you get down to it, they might trade for a reliever instead of trading people away. If they continue to be like this. Now, there's still month and a half till the trade deadline, or 2 months really till the deadline. A lot of things can change, but I think they've gotten to the point right now that the front office almost has to acknowledge this in some way. Jonathan, do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair assessment. Yeah, they're gonna have to make some kind of move if we're still in contention for a playoff spot, and it's just, and also because the fan base has been speaking pretty loudly, about this, because there's a frustration that because they weren't doing as much as I felt they could have done when it came to trying to acquire certain free agents. I'm not talking about like the top A+ list, but they could have, I thought, moved a little bit better on some of these B+, A- free agents that could have made a difference on the team, and that may have had that, responded by saying, "Hey, I got a chance to shine. Now I don't have to be in somebody else's shadow." And so it's a frustrating thing. And like you said, it's going to be a dilemma. Do we try to make a real run in the playoffs and maybe make it past the wild card round or even make it to the league championship series? Is it going to be worth trading some of our key components, for the future to try and get something now as well? So it's going to be, tough. What if we all of a sudden are right there ahead in the division? Say we pull ahead of the, that North Side Chicago team, whose name I won't mention. And do we trade Helsley then? Do we keep him? Even though like you said, are we going to keep him after the season's, over? Odds are no. Somebody's going to shell out big bucks like the Red Sox or the Yankees, whatever, or some other, big spending team that needs that help in the reliever department.
Yeah, it is.
So that's where the dilemma comes in with their money. There is a finite amount of money that's there and that they're willing to spend. And so let's say there's $10 million available. They're thinking, I got $10 million that Liam and Bloom wants to put into the farm system, which is incredibly important. And that's long term. Or do we take that 10 million and spend 8 of it on a couple of players in the trade at the trade deadline to bolster just our current situation? So it's like, spend money for the future, which may have long term significance, versus this $8 million that's going to be just on this short term growth that'll only benefit us just this year. Those are tough and interesting decisions to make.
And it's how the Cardinals have gotten to where they're at, right? I mean, at least that's their story, and the fact that they've tried to supplant the major league roster supplement, sorry, and they've not put that money in development, and so that was the focus, right? This year they're going to put that money in development,
right?
But yeah, I think that you look at the Brewers of a couple of years ago when they were in first and traded Josh Hader, and everything kind of, the whole clubhouse kind of went south on them to some degree.
Yeah.
I don't know that you want to take the risk with the chemistry that the club has to try to, even though I think that in a vacuum, the team could win without Ryan Helsley. Maybe not quite to the extent that they did, but they're still going to win 8 of 10 games that they would have won anyway, I think. But I think the psychological impact of that has to be factored in. And right now, this team is playing a brand of baseball that's exciting. I noticed the attendance for last night was announced at 34,000. So that's at least a seems to be stepping in the right direction. You're starting to get people maybe a little bit more excited about this.
Yeah.
And school is coming, to an end, and that tends to help the crowds as well. But yeah, I think if you went and then tried to trade away from it, again, assuming things don't change, I think you do some long-term damage probably to this team that it would be difficult to repair.
And that no matter what decision they make, they're going to take flack for it. So,
oh sure, that is the nature of the beast.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, Tom can tell you too, but some of the Facebook groups, Cardinals Facebook groups, man, just you can never, it's impossible to satisfy everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them, they're going to blame this, they're going to blame that. Oh, we shouldn't have done that, even after they said they should have done that, right? And it's just incredible, all the people, all the people who hated Ollie now all of a sudden are quiet. And the coaching, but I think a big part of it is the coaching staff seems to have turned things around.
Yeah.
I mean, Ollie can only do so much. He's got to let the coaches do the coaching. He can't coach everything. And I think, especially on defense, we're seeing the results of having, the coaches actually stress like things like fundamentals and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, especially on the hitting side, I think it's been pretty with the stats that the team has put up over the last 5 or 6 years, it's been pretty clear that whatever Turner Ward was doing wasn't working. Because his years are quite a downsize, and so what we're seeing now is a much more exciting offense. Now, granted, you've got younger players, you've got a different focus, but this kind of offense has been a lot more fun to watch than the last couple of years, which felt like a lot of sitting around and waiting, and probably not getting a good pitch at that rate. But now we're seeing more aggressiveness, we're seeing more base running, and it feels a team that, I don't know, Tom. I mean, the last few years, it felt like, they're down 3 runs in the first inning and you could just probably go ahead and turn the game off. But this year, they've shown a resiliency and a way to put things together that I don't think you ever feel quite like they're out of it.
I agree with that. I mean, they're doing exciting things. They're laying down bunts. Alec Burleson got a bunt base hit the other day. They're stealing bases. They're putting pressure on the other team's defense. So yeah, they're often you go up and down that lineup with their bats, and there's not any big holes, especially with Walker coming around. It is exciting to watch them have good quality at bats, smart at bats.
Yeah. Jonathan, we kind of touched on it a minute ago, Tom did, about the development of players, and especially Nolan Gorman. How do you handle that, and what do you think the future looks like for Nolan Gorman?
That's a tough call. I mean, there's no doubt about his talent and his potential. It's just a matter of somehow unlocking it. And teams are only going to be so patient for so long, obviously, and that's true in any organization. So I don't know how to handle that. You want to give him playing time. Maybe he'll find his stride, but at the same time, doing so could hurt you because it could leave you with a big hole in your lineup that you may not be able to afford during certain critical games. But if you don't play him during that critical game, then he's not going to get that experience needed to handle the pressure and things like that. It's a tough one, but if at the same time, somebody's going to dangle some really good potential talent our way for him, maybe the best thing is to, let him shine somewhere else, and let's get some players that might be able to fill in other gaps that we're having.
Yeah, I mean, but if he hits 40 home runs somewhere else, that's you talk about people getting upset for sure. But it is that difficult thing. I mean, you're trying to figure out how do you get him in the lineup and play regularly. We've seen the Cardinals not put him and Jordan Walker in at the same time,
Right.
which is like the complete opposite of what we thought at the beginning of the year, where we thought those guys would be regulars and get their 600 at bats. It's been, I think that in the first 2 months of the season, we've seen a lot of things that are different than we expected. And one of those is Avon Herrera seems to have already shifted to the DH role. It's been great to see him hitting, but since he's come back, I think he's only caught maybe 1 game. Tom, does that make sense, or is that just another roadblock to a fully functioning roster?
Well, it's interesting that a player that young is been so much regulated to the DH role. If they're looking to develop him as a complete player, he needs time behind the plate, and we've seen his work ethic. He worked really hard this past season to get to be the kind of stick he is at the plate. I'm thinking he did the same defensively, so they need to give him a legitimate shot to see if he isn't somebody who has earned and we need behind the plate, which is not to take anything away from Page's defensive skills, but if Herrera could be the complete player that opens up the slot for somebody else's bat to come in and make that lineup even more productive.
Yeah, it's such a thing to figure that out. You traded Gorman now. It's at the low point of his value, but you've got to keep him around. You got to, I don't know. And I don't think he fits well as a bench bat. So then when you get Herrera in there, taking up a DH spot, that maybe Gorman could have done some of that as well. It's a very interesting mix of players that, and I mean, we've talked about roster construction. I think everybody talks about roster construction forever, right? But and how it doesn't always seem to be perfect, right? That there's always seems to be some, too much here and not enough there. But I think we've seen a little bit of that this year. But I think, and it's kind of as John said, kind of reference there, you give a little bit of credit to Ollie Marmol and the staff about how they're using players, and it's working pretty well. I think we've seen good things, and again, they're 5 games over 500. You would not have thought that, and I think I mean, John, don't you think that you have to start giving? I mean, right now, I don't know that he'd win it, but he'd be in the conversation for manager of the year.
I'd say so. I mean, Ollie Marmol, he's the kind of guy who's more of a player's coach. He likes to let the players play, and and that's what most fans usually would say. But since he does that, and it's not, the team was struggling. All of a sudden, that's the wrong thing to do now. So I was like, it's one of those things. But I would say, I'd say he should be in the running because he's been patient with them. He knows when to fire up the team. Because most of the time he seems to be a pretty laid back guy. But man, you do something, if the ump does something, whatever, he'll get fired up.
Yeah, he can hop over he could hop over the fence and get his butt out there to talk to that umpire who just tossed him.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly it. But it's like sometimes he knows when is the best time for him to get ejected to get that team fired up. And I have to say, overall, I mean, I've seen him improve in how he handles the pitching staff, and especially the relief corps, things like that. And it's been working pretty well this year. And I would say let's just keep it up. I mean, for the while, because if it's working, why mess with success?
I think the difference in. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say they've done something right in the sense that these youngsters are working hard, and Jordan Walker is a great example where he's been put in as a defensive replacement late in the game. So I think there's a culture on this team, and I've read articles about Brendan Donovan and the amount of work he has put in on the off season. So I think there's a hungry, let's really work hard and develop our skills and become as fully developed as possible. So it's really exciting to watch Donovan, Walker, and others say, I can get better, and it's going to come through hard work. It's not going to come through any other way. There's no other avenue. And I'm willing to put that time in there to become the fully embodied product that we're enjoying right now.
Yeah, I believe Victor Scott calls it youngry, young and hungry. So, and then it is a feeling on this team, and that's Paul Goldschmidt's doing well in New York, and always glad that Goldie spent his time here, and some of the others, but this team has gotten that youth transfusion over the last couple of years that has really overhauled how you look at the Cardinals and what you think about this team. And it's been fun. And again, if Jordan Walker continues to maybe kind of get his footing, I think this team could be an exciting team for some time to come. Getting close to the end of our time here today, but Tom, Jonathan, is there anything that this team or anything we haven't covered about your podcast, about this team, that you'd like to address before we wrap it up?
Trying to tie the two things together, the work that we've been doing with the players in the 60s and what we're seeing now in 2025 is, for me, it's like, this is the Cardinal organization, a culture of rich legacy. This is the way we have to do things. And we certainly got that from the players that we've been highlighting, and we're getting a sense of that now with these youngsters who are younger in 2024. We're the Cardinals. we have to play at the highest level possible. No excuses allowed.
Yeah, I mean, I second what Tom just said. There's this, and it's like there's a camaraderie that you saw in the Cardinals in the '60s, and how they would come together and how they would have that mix of the young, those younger players as well as the established vets that you need to say, hey, okay, this is how you handle these kind of situations. And just the fact that we're going back to some of the fundamentals and developing the players again, like that was a big part of the Cardinals lore, was how we developed players and have these people out of nowhere come along excuse me, and shine. I mean, one of my favorite things was one story back about 10 years ago or so with the Cubs, and one of them was saying, gosh, I just wish the Cardinals plane would just crash, because I'm so tired of them winning and we're not. And one of the Cubs fans then said, oh, what are you talking about? Some scrub off the bench will come jump out of the plane, get on top of the wing and fix the engine. And but that's what was part of the Cardinals lore, is that we would find these diamonds in the rough. Maybe they would only shine for a couple of years, but they would shine nonetheless when nobody thought they would even be worth anything. And I think we're seeing that again in a way. And it's just there's this like team mentality again that I think was lacking.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. So to wrap this up and to tie it all together, in 30 years, if y'all probably aren't doing it, I know I'm not going to be doing podcasting in 30 years, but if there's a show like yours in 30 or 35 years from now, what Cardinal on this current team do you think fits your motif the most that somebody would be interviewing?
It's a good one. I'd say Jordan Walker's got that kind of potential. I mean, he's got the potential to be, a true star, but at the same time, I could see him being that player that would all of a sudden, has a solid career, but all of a sudden, has that moment in the playoffs that just is way above his normal level of playing. Things like Carl Warwick in the '64 series, for instance, or there's going to be, like a Ron Taylor who had a rough year that year, but yet was critical in that game for the '64 series. That just really helped turn that series around for the team. So yeah, there's going to be, I say he'd be like that. Kyle Leahy could be that kind of player.
Yeah,
I mean, who would have thought? I think you might have brought it up on your latest podcast about how who would have thought him of all people would be the relief pitcher this year. But yet, there he is. He's in a sense not quite yet, but I mean, he's sort of like a Barney Schultz of '64. Here's a guy out of nowhere that just all of a sudden shines.
Absolutely. Tom, you got anybody?
I like the story that Donovan headlines, and that I can play multiple positions. You want me to play left field and make incredible catches? You want me to make turn great double plays at second base or shortstop, or wherever you put him? Or you want me to be a Jordan Walker who was originally a first baseman? I'll learn how to play the outfield. I'll learn how to contribute. And so Libertor, you want me to be a great relief pitcher, or you need me as a starter? Gosh, that's what I want to do too. I'll come in here and I'll do an amazing job for you. Those are interesting stories there that multiple players are adding chapters to.
I could also see like a Miles Michaelish, just because in 20 or 30 years he's probably going to be a guy that only gets mentioned by longtime Cardinal fans, right? I mean, he's had a few moments here and there, but and maybe he'll have a postseason moment this year as well. But he'll have. I mean, he's the guy that I think right now is currently the longest, maybe have had the longest run in the majors. I know Helsley, I think, is the one that's been in the organization the longest. But and have overlap the Wainwright and Molina years.
Yeah.
The year of Pujols of coming back. Feels like that's a guy that somebody's going to be talking to in 20 or 30 years, just to feel out about what these teams were like.
I agree. He's a great story this year. I really like him, so I'm so happy for him. That's just great.
Yeah, I agree about Miles too. Yeah, he's turned it around this year, and it's could have happened at a better time too.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you're right. I think he would be a player that would love to be interviewed.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. I have no doubt, and it would probably be a very entertaining interview as well, I would think. So,
yes.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you giving me some time this morning, and Jonathan, especially for you waking up early out there on the West Coast.
Not a problem. My pleasure. This has been great.
Well, good, and we'll have to do it again. And we'll get the links out there so you can go back and listen to all the interviews these guys have done, and kind of dive into that Cardinal history. Next week, we wrap our run of guests with old friend Alex Crisafulli, who's going to join us. Looking forward to talking to him then. But until then, for Tom and John, I'm Daniel. Good night.
I knew he was on the team, and I knew he was an All-American at 57 at TCU. But I thought an All-American was just a good old boy. I didn't know what an All-American was.
I love
it. And I was not impressed at all.
he's All-American like everybody else that's an American. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. It's official.
Yeah,
nice.
He's just an All-American boy.
Hi, everyone. Rich Bray here with a look back at how the 1978 Cardinals added a power bet to their lineup when they sent pitcher Eric Rasmussen to the Padres for outfielder George Hendrick. The trade occurred on May 26, 1978, and in that day's game, the Cardinals managed just 7 singles off Cubs starting pitcher Dave Roberts in a 6-0 loss to Chicago. The defeat was emblematic of a season-long problem. The Cardinals' offense had been quiet for much of the year. With the average Major League OPS at 702, the Cardinals had numerous players in their lineup who were producing far below that mark. Right fielder Jerry Morales was at 598. Center fielders Jerry Mumphrey and Tony Scott were at 419 and 549, respectively. And even Lou Brock, at age 39 and in his 18th season, had a 600 OPS. With most of their lineup struggling, the Cardinals' offense relied almost entirely on Ted Simmons, Gary Templeton, and Keith Hernandez. Stuck in last place at 15 and 29 and 9.5 games out, the Cardinals needed help, and general manager Bing Devine believed George Hendrick could provide it. In Hendrick, Devine found a 28-year-old right-hander in his 8th Major League season. Though Hendrick was off to a slow start with San Diego, batting just .243 with 3 homers and 8 RBIs, he was coming off a 1977 season in which he hit .311 with 23 homers, 81 RBIs, and 11 stolen bases. However, Hendrick had been frustrated by his role in San Diego, where manager Roger Craig was juggling his roster, leaving players guessing as to where they fit into each day's lineup. "I hope this stabilizes things," Craig said after the trade was completed. "We won't have to make a whole lot of changes anymore." In St. Louis, manager Ken Boyer said he planned to bet Hendrick or Hernandez third, depending on the pitcher. Whoever didn't hit third would bat behind cleanup hitter Ted Simmons. When I played against the Cardinals, my observation was that if they had someone in the lineup who could protect Ted Simmons and hit 20 home runs and drive in 80 or 90 runs, I thought they could contend, said Hendrick. "I'm not saying I'm that guy, but I'm going to try to be." A former first overall pick by Oakland in 1968, Hendrick was an all-star in Cleveland in 1974 and 1975, but his motivation was often questioned. Post-Dispatch reporter Neil Russo wrote that Hendrick has been accused of not going all out in his play. He has been known not to run out a grounder at times. To get Hendrick, the Cardinals absorbed the remaining money on a 3-year, $500,000 contract. Though Devine denied it, the deal included special considerations for Hendrick to waive his no-trade clause, according to his agent. In return, San Diego got Rasmussen, who had posted a 3.48 ERA over 233 innings in 1977. Padres pitcher John D'Aquisto said, "He's a fierce competitor who has a good control and keeps the ball low. You've got to think about what he's going to do for us for the future." Rasmussen pitched 3 seasons for the Padres before returning to St. Louis. Hendrick, meanwhile, quickly became a cornerstone of the Cardinals' lineup. Following the trade, he hit 17 homers and drove in 67 runs in just 102 games for the Cardinals in 1978. By 1980, under Whitey Herzog, Hendrick posted career highs with 25 homers and 109 RBIs, earning an All-Star nod, a Silver Slugger Award, and an 8th-place finish in the MVP voting. Herzog recalled scouting Hendrick for the Mets back in 1968. He was a center fielder and there was no fence out there, Herzog wrote. Instead of coming in with his teammates in between innings, if he wasn't due to bat, he'd just wander out and lay in the field, in the grass, in deep center field, or out on the foul line and take a nap. Who knows what was going on in his head? By 1982, however, Hendrick, who had a well-known policy of declining media interviews, had become a calming veteran presence in the Cardinals clubhouse. He hit 19 homers and drove in 104 runs to help St. Louis win the NL East, then hit .308 in the NLCS. In the World Series, Hendrick hit .321 and drove in 5 more runs. In Game 7, he threw out Robin Yount at third base and drove in the go-ahead run. When the final out was recorded, he slipped away without joining the team celebration. Pitcher Bob Forsch called him the following day to check on the veteran outfielder. I just wanted you guys to enjoy it, Hendrick told him. I was listening to the celebration in my car while I was driving home. Hendrick played 2 more seasons in St. Louis, made another All-Star team in 1983, and was traded after the 1984 season. He retired in 1988 with a .278 career batting average, 267 homers, and 1,111 RBIs. In 7 seasons with the Cardinals, he hit .294 with 122 homers and 582 RBIs. For more Cardinals history, visit stlredbirds.com or follow me on Twitter at Remembirds, REMEMBIRDS.
Suter from the belt to the plate. A swing and a miss, and that's a winner! That's a winner! A World Series winner for the Cardinals!